31, 2024 Best Picture nominees. Let's get to Killers of the Flower Moon, which is the third Best Picture nominee that we have done so far. And we will be doing all 10 in the next couple of weeks now that the Oscars are over. Finally got caught up on all of them, and so I figured we'd just knock them out real quick. Killers of the Flower Moon is directed by Martin Scorsese, co-written as well. Also co-written by Eric Roth, who also wrote Dune, A Star is Born, Forrest Gump, Munich, Benjamin Button. The guy's amazing. And stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, Jesse Plemons, Tantu Cardinal, John Lithgow, Brendan Fraser. List goes on and on and on. And the synopsis is, when oil is discovered in 1920s Oklahoma under Osage Nation land, the Osage people are murdered one by one until the FBI steps in to unravel the mystery. So, like many, I am a huge Martin Scorsese fan. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of my all-time favorite actors, if not my number one favorite ever. And obviously they've worked together many, many times over the years with no end in sight, which I'm so appreciative for because I think they are a perfect match. And this one is a film that I had wanted to see for a long time, but I knew it was 3.5 hours long. I think it's his longest film to date. It's a really heavy story. It's a lot to take in, and I wanted to make sure I had the time and energy to really sit down and watch it in one sitting. I wish I had seen it in theaters, but sadly I didn't get a chance to. Also, one quick thing now that the Oscars have happened, I am so sad that this one got completely shut out yet again for Scorsese, which is incredibly undeserved, but he is Scorsese, so everybody knows how great he is. Anyways, this movie, it's hard to even really know where to start. It's a lot of movie. Like, that's the best way to describe it first off. Like, there is so much going on. There's so much story, so many ideas. And while it's not a film for everyone, considering the runtime, the sort of story it is, I know that there's some people who think it's too long, it needs to be cut down, this, that, and the other. And while I think from a personal taste, I get that, but I thought the movie flat out was amazing. It wouldn't even be like top 5 Scorsese for me. It's definitely one of his recent best, but he has so many great pictures in his career that it's even hard to rank this one against all the other great ones, because as is obvious, no one makes a movie like him. Really, time after time after time, he can do anything, and he has done basically everything. And every time I watch one of his movies, I'm like, how does this work so well? Like, how did the story come from nothing, or all these different pieces, and how did it come together to be this unique, amazing thing that nobody else could tell it in the way that he does? And for anyone who doesn't know the story, I'm not an expert on the story. I haven't read the book. I'm interested in doing that, but it is this true story about these very, very wealthy Native Americans who had oil in their land, and then a lot of white people discovered this, and they slowly started killing them off one by one, like just shooting them in the street, blowing up their homes, you name it, they probably did it, poisoning them. It's pretty insane, and as it touches on a little bit, it did lead to the basis for the FBI, because these lawmen were sent in from Washington to investigate, and they faced all these problems and jurisdiction issues. It was a complete mess, and it was very, very easy, especially at the time, to cover those murders and other crimes up that the FBI had a lot of problems dealing with. And getting more so into the story itself, DiCaprio, who again is amazing, his character is very, very interesting because he's a bit of an idiot, like kind of a doofy, impressionable sort of kid in a way. Like, he's a war veteran, and he comes back and meets with his Uncle King, who is played by Robert De Niro, and he's basically the big man on campus, and he has a lot of connections with the Osage as well as other businesses in the area, and is basically like the mayor in a way, the unofficial mayor. But what I loved about that character, in terms of not liking him, quote unquote, more so just being interested in the story and also the performances, he's such an impressionable kid that he necessarily, and I won't spoil anything too much, don't worry, he wouldn't necessarily have gotten involved in the stuff that he did if it weren't for Robert De Niro's character. Like, he's someone who could have married, this isn't a spoiler, he could have had a family with Lily Gladstone's character and not been involved in any of De Niro's dark dealings, but he did. And so I think that also gets into the ideas of racism and how people can be influenced by parents, by guardians, relatives, just their surroundings, because you aren't born racist, you aren't born a criminal, but if you're led in that direction, no matter how good a person you are, it's possible that sort of thing can happen suddenly. And so that arc of that character is very interesting. The courtroom stuff at the end is great. And one thing that Scorsese does incredibly well and pretty much better than almost anyone is his editing. And that's partly direction too, in his writing, in this at least. But the editing in this movie could have been a complete catastrophe because it's 3.5 hours. There's so many characters, so many plot lines, so many ideas, and that easily could have become a complete mess. You wouldn't know who was connected to who, why was someone doing this or that. And then also the pacing, like the pacing for a 3.5 hour movie, a period film, is near perfect. Like there were points where I was thinking, wow, this is actually still going on. Like there's 2 hours left and already a lot has happened. That's pretty insane. But I was never bored. I was always thinking, wow, this is just going and going and going and going and going. It could have been 5 hours and it would have been all right with that masterclass of editing. And so maybe that isn't the way everybody feels. Maybe somebody gets an hour and a half and they're like, all right, I get it. I can't watch 2 more hours of this. I understand that, but I thought it was perfectly put together in that sense. The storytelling, the editing, the directing, the score is excellent. It looks amazing, of course. The twist on the epilogue credits, I guess you can call them, in terms of what happened after the fact in this story, I loved that. Like, it's kind of jarring at first, but once I figured the twist, so to speak, after the fact, I thought that was brilliant. I had never really seen something done like that, and the cameo in that moment is great as well. So I think it is one of his all-time best movies. I'm sad that it didn't get more of a box office draw. I think it sort of flopped in a way, despite all the really good reviews and Oscar noms. Hopefully, it'll have a shelf life, which I feel like it will, but it's definitely one of his most personal, I think, and passionate projects, considering the story itself, the runtime. Like, this is the sort of movie that does not get made very often anymore. Usually you get a 3 hour superhero movie and that's it. But this is a film that I think everyone should watch, even just watch some of, because I think that there's a lot to think about there and enjoy. And despite the darkness of it all, it's brilliant to me. And I think he is doing some of the best work that he's ever done this last decade or so. I think he is an absolute genius. And if you haven't watched many Martin Scorsese movies, or you haven't seen his most recent string of them, check them out. Even if you don't love them, they're so unique, so original, so refreshing. And I'm so appreciative that there are still people like Martin Scorsese around. So absolutely must watch it. That's what I say. That is a heavy 5 out of 5.